You're such a disappointment. Those were the exact words my mom said to me that night. Not quietly, not privately. She said them right there at the dinner table, in front of everyone. For a second, no one moved. The clinking of forks stopped. My dad froze mid-bite, and my younger sister, Lila Bell, just stared down at her plate like she wished she could disappear. I wish I could say it was the first time I'd heard those words, but it wasn't. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I'm Mila Bell, I'm 17, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the disappointment in my family. Not my sister, though. Lila is 15 and basically perfect in my parents' eyes. Straight A's, violin competitions, teachers love her. My relatives brag about her at every holiday dinner. Me? I'm the comparison. Why can't you be more like Lila? I've heard that sentence more times than I can count. But that night, something was different. Because 3 weeks earlier, I found something in my dad's office. Something hidden deep inside a locked drawer. Something that explained why my parents had always treated me differently. And as my mom sat there glaring at me across the dinner table, calling me a disappointment again, I slowly pushed my chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. Then I looked straight at my sister and said something that made both my parents turn completely pale. Then she deserves to know the truth. My dad's face went stiff. My mom whispered one word, "Mila, don't." But by then, it was already too late. And what I was about to reveal would destroy the one secret my parents had spent 15 years hiding. Have you ever been given a label so early in life that it felt impossible to escape it? That was my life. In my family, there were only two roles: the golden child and the disappointment. Guess which one I was? My sister Lila Bell is 15. Smart, polite, talented. Basically everything my parents ever wanted in a daughter. Teachers love her, neighbors praise her. At family gatherings, relatives talk about her like she's some kind of future genius. And my parents, they absolutely adore it. I remember when I was 10 years old and brought home a report card with mostly A's and one B+. I was actually proud of it. I walked into the kitchen smiling, thinking maybe this time my parents would be impressed. My dad glanced at the paper for maybe 2 seconds. Then he sighed. "Why can't you work harder like Lila?" Lila was 8. 8. And somehow I was already being compared to her. It wasn't just school either. When Lila drew pictures, they went straight onto the fridge. When I won a school writing contest, my mom just said, "That's nice," before changing the subject. Birthday parties were bigger for her, celebrations louder for her, praise constant for her. For me, lectures, expectations, disappointment. But as I got older, something about it started to feel strange, because the difference in how we were treated wasn't just normal favoritism. It felt deliberate, like my parents were constantly keeping me at a distance. For example, there was one topic they would never talk about, the year before Lila was born. Then anytime I asked about it, the conversation shut down instantly. Old photo albums had missing pages from that year. Family stories skipped right over it. At first, I thought it was just a weird coincidence. Until 3 weeks ago. That afternoon, I was looking for a charger in my dad's office while he was at work. His desk drawer was slightly open, which was unusual because he normally kept everything locked. Inside was a single envelope. Cream-colored, thick, and written across the front in neat handwriting were two words that immediately made my stomach tighten. Lila Bell. I probably should have left it alone, but something about it felt wrong. So I opened it, and the document inside revealed something that instantly made my heart start pounding. Because it wasn't just a letter, it was a DNA report, and the name missing from it changed everything. Imagine opening a piece of paper and realizing in a single second that your entire family story might be a lie. That's exactly what happened to me. At first, the document didn't even make sense. It looked medical, official, the kind of form you'd see in a hospital file. Across the top were the words, "Genetic Paternity Analysis." Below that were two names I immediately recognized. Child, Lila Bell. Mother, Karen Bell. My mom. So far, nothing strange. But then I looked at the line where the father's name should have been. Instead of David Bell in my dad, there was a blank field followed by the test result. Probability of paternity, 0%. I blinked. Then I read it again, 0%. meaning the man I had called dad my entire life wasn't actually Lila's biological father. My first thought was that the report had to be wrong, but attached behind it was another document, a letter. The letter had read, Morales Fertility Institute. It was written by a doctor named Ethan Morales and dated 15 years ago. The letter referenced something called a donor conception procedure. It explained that due to fertility complications, an anonymous donor had been used to help my parents have another child. Another child? Lila. I sat there in my dad's chair staring at the papers while my brain tried to process it. My sister, the perfect daughter my parents adored, had been born through a donor. And based on the way these documents were hidden, she clearly had no idea. But the strangest part wasn't the DNA report, it was what I noticed when I flipped the envelope over. Written in my mom's handwriting were 6 words. Mila must never tell her. My chest tightened when I read that. Never tell her. They weren't just hiding the truth from Lila, they were hiding it from me too. And suddenly something about my entire childhood started to make a lot more sense. Because if my parents were that desperate to keep this secret, maybe that was why they had always kept me at arm's length. But I still hadn't decided what to do with the information. Not yet. Until tonight. Until my mom looked at me across the dinner table and said the words she'd said my whole life. You're such a disappointment. And in that moment, I realized something. If I was going to be treated like the problem anyway, then maybe it was time the truth stopped being a secret. The moment a secret leaves your mouth, there's no way to pull it back. No rewind button, no undo. And as I stood up from the dinner table that night, I knew exactly what I was about to do. My chair scraped loudly across the floor as I pushed it back. The sound cut through the room like a warning. My mom was still staring at me with that same expression, the one I'd seen my whole life. Frustration, disappointment, like I was some problem she couldn't fix. You're such a disappointment, she had just said. So I looked at her. Calm, completely calm. Then I turned my head toward my sister. Lila was sitting across the table, twirling her fork slowly, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. That's when I said it. Then she deserves to know the truth? The words hung in the air. My dad stopped moving instantly. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. My mom's face lost all color, and Lila blinked at me. What truth? She asked. Her voice was confused, almost nervous. My mom reacted immediately. Mila, stop. Just those 2 words. Sharp, panicked, but that reaction told Lila everything she needed to know. Her eyebrows pulled together as she looked between our parents. Wait, what secret? The room suddenly felt smaller. My dad slowly set his fork down on the table, but he didn't say a word. That silence was louder than anything. I reached into the pocket of my hoodie. Because when I came downstairs for dinner tonight, I had already made a decision. I had brought the papers with me. I pulled out the folded DNA report and placed it on the table. My mom stood up instantly. Mila, don't you dare. But I slid the paper across the table toward Lila before she could finish. Lila looked down at it, confused. Then she started reading. At first, nothing happened. Then I saw her fingers tighten around the edge of the page. Her eyes moved back to the top of the document, then down again. Finally, she looked up. Not at me, at our dad. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Dad, is this real? My dad didn't answer. He just stared at the table, and that silence told her everything. But the truth coming out that night didn't just change Lila's life. It forced my parents to finally reveal something else. Something that explained why I had always been treated like the outsider in my own family. The moment the truth came out, everything fell apart. Lila was still holding the paper, sure, staring at it like the words might suddenly change if she looked long enough. They didn't. Her hands were shaking now. Mom, she said slowly, her voice tight with confusion. What is this? My mom looked like she might faint. She grabbed the back of her chair as if she needed it to stay standing. Lila, sweetheart, she started, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. But that sentence never works, does it? Because when someone says that, it usually means it's exactly what you think. Lila turned to my dad again. Dad, please just tell me. The room was painfully quiet. Finally, my dad took a deep breath and rubbed his face like the weight of 15 years had just dropped on his shoulders. It's true, he said. Just 2 words. But they changed everything. My mom began crying immediately. Why my dad explained that years ago, they had struggled to have another child. After several failed attempts, they went to a fertility clinic. The doctors told them the only way to have another baby was to use a donor, an anonymous donor. That donor is the reason Lila exists. Lila sat there silently absorbing it all, but then she asked the question none of us expected. Why didn't you tell me? Neither of my parents had a good answer. Just fear. Fear that she'd feel different. Fear that she'd see our family differently. But then my dad said something else. Something that finally answered the question I'd had my entire life. We were always afraid you might find out from someone else, he admitted quietly, glancing at me. So we tried to control everything, including distance. Distance. That's when it clicked. When they hadn't treated me like the disappointment because of my grades or attitude. They pushed me away because they were afraid I'd accidentally expose their secret. All those years, all those comparisons, all those lectures. It was never really about me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lila stood up. She walked around the table. And instead of yelling at me, instead of blaming me, she hugged me tightly. Thank you for telling me, she whispered. And in that moment, something strange happened. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the disappointment anymore. Because sometimes the person blamed for everything is actually the only one brave enough to tell the truth. So I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, would you have kept the secret? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Let me know what you think.